So there's a big stigma out there that investing requires property, stocks, and all kinds of other things, where we're here to tell you how you can invest in an automobile.
Ooh.
All that and much more. So welcome back, you guys, here with Gulf Coast Gearheads. You know, we have so much we want to talk to you guys about, but mainly really want to dive deep into how you can really invest and find yourself in a lucrative spot when it comes to just automobiles. And this is a huge topic that most economists and most people out there will really frown on. I mean, Dave Ramsey, you name anybody else out there will tell you cars are the worst investment in the world. We're not going to sit here and say that they're wrong. We're just going to tell you where there are some opportunities to be right.
Yeah, there is some wrong and right to that statement.
Yeah.
Of course, any other vehicle you're going to buy, if you go like right now, my 2014 F-150, would not be an ideal investment on a vehicle. Like your everyday drivers, that's not the ones that we're talking about today. Not just any car can fit into this category.
Right. There's many different things that you can wrap into what makes a car more rare than another and why it would be a collectible car. Now, we can just dive right into this. So the main thing about what we're really talking about and honing in on is understanding why a specific trim level may be more valuable than another. And when we talk about trims, we're not just necessarily talking about, if you go look at a Honda Accord and you have the EX and the EXL and then the sports and all different trims like that, we're talking about specifically, even if you wanted to talk about Honda, that a Civic Type R with really, really low mileage will, in the very, very long run, be worth way more than just a Civic SI, even a Civic EX, anything like that, four-door, two-door, but just as a Civic, that's the one that's going to be worth more.
Yeah, it has more of a specialty feel to it, which is really our first point about it, is the VIN and what makes the vehicle special, the identity of the vehicle that you're buying.
Right.
So, to use an example that I know right off the top of my head is we've talked about in past episodes before, but there is a SVT special vehicle team who works specifically with Ford. They've done a bunch of other random vehicles, not just Mustangs before, but Mustangs is really what they're known for. And in 1993, the last year of the Fox Body Mustang, they made an SVT Cobra R. They've made Fox Body Cobras before, but the R stands for, you ready for it? Race.
What?
So as you can predict in most automotive special letterings like that and stuff, but
yeah.
Very 1 year they made this vehicle. It came in any color you wanted, if that color was red though. So came in one color, about 107 exactly of them were made. These were 5-liter, 5-speed manual transmission race cars. And what they wanted to do was to sell this vehicle to not everyday drivers, but people who wanted to go drive the car, which is what SVT wants. They didn't
enjoy them.
Yes, they wanted you to get the enjoyment out of it. However, though, all 100 and so of them, or majority of them, were bought by collectors and held onto for years and years and years. Now, this vehicle, when it originally sold in 1993, the MSRP I have is a little bit under $26,000. Now, in today's money, that's about $30,000, give or take. People are selling these Cobra R's for well over $100,000. If they're in, like you're saying, low miles, the paint was brand new. Some of these vehicles still have the window stickers on them, but they weren't enjoyed and driven like SVT wanted them to, which is why in 1995, when they made another Cobra R, you were only allowed to buy it if you had a competition driver's license or you owned some type of racing team. So they still wound up in the hands of collectors to like those people sold them or like those people are also collectors. But that's an example of a collectible vehicle that more than tripled, if not quadrupled, what the original price of the vehicle was.
Right. And going off of that point, I mean, guys, keep in mind and just study around with some of these brands. And there was time periods where they went away from certain engine and transmission styles that then drove the value of the previous models up. And specifically,
a discontinued feature of some type.
Right. And specifically, the ones that I really love and have actually enjoyed recently is when you're talking about naturally aspirated V8s. And yes, they're still making those with Ford, but we're talking about German engineering. Mercedes doesn't do that anymore. I'd be hard pressed to find a naturally aspirated engine in either of BMW or Mercedes's line of cars. Now, when we're talking about that, it's specifically, I had found a 2013 M3, so BMW M3, two-door hardtop convertible. So when the top goes down, the value goes up. So that's just another thing to drive the value up. But this is also talking about, it had a naturally aspirated V8, and that is something to this day, and I was just talking about it with Jacob a little while ago, is that V8 that they had in that M3, it's still to this day, 8 years almost later, is still only 20 horsepower lower than the way more high performing M3 right now. So still 400 plus horsepower and a naturally aspirated V8 versus a twin turbo V6, or sorry, inline six. Whew, we get in trouble in the BMW world. But in the Mercedes line, you have the C63 from up until about 2015 in the coupe version that came with a naturally aspirated 6.2 liter versus one that I've recently enjoyed, a 4-liter twin turbo V8. So there's this like nostalgia, and also where people 20 years from now won't even believe you in a way, unless they know enough about car like industry and history and stuff like that, about why a naturally aspirated engine is somewhat cooler than a turbocharged engine with its rarity in the market.
Yeah, but you know what they say, Josh? There is no replacement for displacement.
That's right. And I mean, you even have other brands that we saw are trying to make this transition. I mean, we just read something where Lexus is looking to move away from their naturally aspirated 5-liter V8. And that's something that you'd seen in their RCF, their GSF, and even their really high-performing Lexus LC 500. Now, that worries me because that's one of the few where it was still hanging on. It was still being created brand new with the naturally aspirated V8 outside of Ford. And you're going to see more American cars between Challengers, Chargers, Mustangs, Camaros, and rest in peace Camaro here in a couple of years. That's just crap. But anyways, they were creating them with naturally aspirated V8s, but these imports, that was a rarity. And so that, to me, that's what drives the value of that car up. Now, what we're really getting to with you guys is just educating yourself on what kind of car do you like, and are you someone that has the budget in order to do something like that, to make a step like that. So when you go to a dealership and you're not buying an everyday driver, but you see that the brand new Supra just came out, even though we've already talked about and made fun of it a little bit on this podcast, that the initial relaunch of the Supra wasn't nearly fast enough. This car will still drive way up in value years from now because it was the first edition back as a Supra. Now, a car that's surging in value right now, surprisingly, and it's still pretty low, is a Honda S2000. It gets talked about a lot between car enthusiasts. Very popular car, a smaller coupe, similar to Miata, but had a nice 6-cylinder engine in it, so it was very, very proud in that market. But
yeah, so it all depends on collectability of the vehicle. So to use another muscle car reference for you, this is an older version or older example. One of my dad's favorite muscle cars is a 1971 Plymouth Hemi Cuda, and they're super rare. I mean, Mopar vehicles in general are just, you don't see them as much. They're a lot more rare than you see Mustangs and Camaros, older ones, all the time. But this year model, the Hemi Cuda, you could buy it back in 1971, which is just ridiculous to me, but for less than $5,000. But in today's money, in 2020, that's about, actually, you know, I just realized the number I gave you earlier about the Cobra was wrong. So just to correct myself, the 25 grand back in 1993 is equivalent to about almost $45,000 in today's money. Okay.
So like buying a nice GT premium.
Yeah, a GT performance package, something like that. But now, if you're talking in 1971, $5,000 in today's money is about 32 grand. So that's what that number is.
That's nice.
But again, you can't find one of those for less than $300,000 if it's in showroom quality, because the value has just skyrocketed. So it has 10 times made the money it has if you bought one and have owned one since 1971.
Right. And every brand out there has these, like, I mean, it's not necessarily a halo car, but it's just one of these cars that these brands sat back and said, you know what, I want to make a car that's I'm going to be proud of. Like, it's not everybody's going to get it. It's going to be limited production. I mean, even the corny retailers out there say, oh, limited time, limited supply. It's like, but this is a real thing. Knowing that if it's a really weird and awesome engine design that had a lot of performance that they went away with, or if this is a car that they produced in limited production. Now, to counter that, not every car that was produced in limited production is like falling under this umbrella, because there are cars. I mean, I drive a 2017 Volkswagen CC, and there is a big difference between how many cars that actually sold of that versus how many they made of that. Because my car, they made roughly 80 to 100,000 of them, and only about, in the last model year, only about less than 5,000 sold brand new at dealerships. And so there's a huge number right there where only so many of them sold. So there's not that many driving around, but it's not for the right reasons.
Yeah.
It just fell in a funky segment, didn't compete well based on price. But when you run it against others like that, I mean, you look at the Dodge Demon, a lot higher of a price number, but brand new MSRP. Me and Jacob talked about this. It was like mid 80,000 or so. You add on a couple different things, really different features and like panoramic sunroof, stuff like that, or just the different roof. You could drive it up into closer to 90. But now, if you find a Demon, if you found one for sale right now, it's pushing about 150, and that car is only a couple years old.
I told you I had a dealership in California, a Dodge dealership. They sold two of them about a year ago, last May, for about 140 and 145,000, two of them in about a week.
To the same dude.
Came and bought them outright. I was like, dude, what is this guy doing? He could be doing what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
But with that being said, then, what do you think will be future classics then, Josh? Like, what do you think being produced now or within the last couple of years will be on that level?
In a weird way, I could see something like some of these older, like, you know what, a really good one is a TTRS. I'm just going to throw out in left field. They discontinued the Audi TT generation. Like, it's done. Rest in peace. Sad, fun little sports car. It's the baby R8. Looks cool. They discontinued it recently, and I see that weird 5-cylinder turbocharged engine, especially in the Audi TT models, comparing it to the Audi RS3, same powertrain, but it's just a discontinued model with an awesome engine. So you're talking about 400 plus horsepower in a car that is very little with awesome technology, and it's just not going to be seen anymore. And it's held by a great brand. That's just me throwing out left field. It's quite possible it may not generate as much of a value just because it's German and they're very well known of depreciating. But I find that car really cool. I don't see a lot of them driving around. So that's another thing. Like, it's like every time you see one, you're like, whoa, like, as a car enthusiast, I see one, I tip my hat. I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah. I think another good example, and probably an obvious example, will be the C8 Corvette. Once it gets 25, 30 years old, I think it's definitely going to be some type of collector vehicle, because it's the first of its kind for Corvette engine. whole new redesign. They went for a whole European feel and design and drive to it. So to me, I think that's kind of an obvious pick for what will become a classic collectible vehicle.
Right. Now, and it's not always like there's not always a car in every generation that makes sense for it to be collectible. We're getting to a weird time period in the car market outside of the fact that you have issues with production and with everything that's happening based on the economy. You're going to have these lulls, but there are times when at the high points of these brands where they were creating a car one-offs almost off these production lines where they're making 100 of these Camaros and then they make 1 or 5 or 10 or whatever ZL1s. So it's a very thoughtful piece of car, and it's hard to find a lot of these MSRP below 40 or 50 just because of the nature of most of these cars. If
they're already going to start out expensive.
Yeah, if they're building with care and they matter, like if this brand really cared about when they built it, it's going to be pretty nice. One more car I'll throw out there, and it was a car I almost picked up last year. It's very random. It was like a 2016 Volvo S60 T6 Polestar. So a lot of words there, but definitely was a cool car. And what made it really cool is they only made to America about 350 of them of that year. And then they only had 3 or 4 colors. And so each of them was only made about 70 to 100 of each color. And so you're really talking about when you're driving around with one of those, you're a part of a small group where you could get somewhat of a Facebook group going of those people. And to me, I was like, that's pretty cool. And you could have where later in time, because then after that model year into 2017, 2018, and then they discontinued the T6 Polestar of the S60s. That was the last year where they used a 6-cylinder turbo and supercharged engine, and then went back down into a 4-cylinder turbocharged, supercharged engine, producing similar numbers. But it was just a discontinue of a V6 that Volvo really killed at. So
if you have other vehicles that you think will be collectibles or classics in the next 25, 30 years, or something that you would buy that would fit into this category, let us know in the comments below what you're thinking.
But other than that, you guys just go ahead and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date with what we're producing content-wise. Really appreciate you guys always enjoying what we have to offer, and providing your input whenever you can. But other than that, that's us, me and Jacob, Gulf Coast Gearheads, signing off.